You know how sometimes you look at a relationship you're in, or maybe one you've been in, and something just feels off? Like deep down, you know it's not good for you, but no matter how many times you tell yourself you should walk away, you somehow end up back in the same place again. It's like your mind knows the truth, but your heart or maybe your body is pulling you in another direction. That pull, that magnetic addictive loop could be a trauma bond. And here's the thing, most people don't even realize they're in one until they're already drowning in it. A trauma bond isn't just about loving someone who hurts you. It's about being stuck in a cycle that feels like love one moment and like survival the next. It's that confusing mix where the highs are so unbelievably high that you feel addicted to the person, and the lows are so crushing that you tell yourself you can't live without them. It feels like chaos disguised as passion. And that's why so many people confuse it with love, because it feels intense, dramatic, and unforgettable. But in reality, it's the pain keeping you hooked, not the love. Maybe this sounds familiar. You've had moments where you've cried your eyes out over this person, swore you were done, maybe even blocked them or told your friends you'd never go back. And then just a few days later, they send one text or they look at you a certain way, and suddenly everything in you melts. You forget all the bad parts, your brain rushes in with all the good memories, and you convince yourself, maybe this time will be different. That flip flop, that desperate need for the good version of them to come back, is the heartbeat of a trauma bond. What's tricky is that from the outside, people might say, why don't you just leave? But if you're in it, you know it's not that simple. It feels like leaving them would be like cutting off your own oxygen. They've become your source of both pain and comfort, like the wound and the bandage at the same time. You might even feel like no one else could ever understand you the way they do, or that the connection you share is once in a lifetime. And the more toxic it gets, the more you cling, because the bond isn't just emotional, it's chemical. Your brain is literally rewiring itself to crave the rush of relief when they give you affection again after hurting you. Think about this. When they give you attention after ignoring you, doesn't it feel 10 times more intense than if it came from anyone else? When they finally say something sweet after days of being cold, doesn't it feel like the best thing in the world? Oh, that's not love. That's withdrawal relief. It's like your brain's been starved and then suddenly fed, and that contrast makes the affection feel addictive. That's why people stuck in trauma bonds will say things like, but the good times are amazing, even though the bad times are soul crushing. The good times only feel so good because of the pain that came before them. The thing about trauma bonds is that they don't start off toxic. They usually begin in the most magical way. And that's why they're so confusing. You don't see the trap being set while you're falling into it. It often starts with love bombing. This is when someone showers you with affection, attention, and intensity right from the beginning. They tell you things you've always wanted to hear. They make you feel like you're the most important person in the world. And the connection feels instant, powerful, almost too good to be true. And that's because it kind of is. It's like they're building the hook, laying the foundation of the bond by making you feel safe, adored, and chosen. Maybe you've experienced this. They text you nonstop in the beginning, always want to see you, compliment you in ways no one else ever has, and the relationship moves at lightning speed. You're not just dating, you're already talking about the future, about how no one else could ever understand either of you like this. And you believe it because it feels so real. The intensity isn't an accident. It's designed to get you attached fast before you have time to see the red flags. Then comes the devaluation stage, and this is where things get confusing. All of a sudden, the person who once couldn't get enough of you seems distant, critical, or cold. They start pointing out flaws, they get irritated by things they used to adore, and you're left wondering what you did wrong. Maybe they don't text back as fast anymore, or they cancel plans, or they snap at you over something small. The same person who once made you feel like you were perfect now makes you feel like you're never enough. And instead of pulling away, you cling harder because you're desperate to get back to the version of them who loved you so intensely at the start. This back and forth creates a sense of whiplash. You go from being on a pedestal to feeling like a burden, and your brain scrambles to make sense of it. You tell yourself, maybe I messed up, or if I just try harder, they'll love me like they used to. And before you know it, you're bending over backwards, changing pieces of yourself just to win back the approval you had in the beginning. You're no longer being loved for who you are. You're being trained to perform for scraps of affection. And then comes withdrawal. This is when they really pull away. They might ignore you, go silent for days, or emotionally shut down. And during this time, you feel sick, restless, anxious, like you can't breathe without them. It's not just missing them, it's your body going into panic, like you're losing your lifeline. That's because your brain has started to associate their affection with survival. So when it's taken away, it feels unbearable. And that's when you're at your most vulnerable because you do almost anything to feel that love that again. Then, just when you're about to break, they come back. They text you, apologize, maybe bring flowers, or say they were just stressed. They might even act like nothing happened, and you're so relieved that you forgive them instantly. This is the reconciliation stage, and it feels euphoric. It's like the sun comes out after a storm. You're flooded with happiness, comfort, and hope. You tell yourself, see, they do love me. We're okay again. That relief is so powerful, it reinforces the entire cycle. And now, without even realizing it, you're hooked. This cycle repeats over and over: love bombing, devaluation, withdrawal, reconciliation. Each round makes the bond stronger, not weaker, because your brain is being trained like it's on a slot machine. You never know when the affection is going to come back, but when it does, it feels like the jackpot. That unpredictability is exactly what makes it addictive. If they were cruel all the time, you'd leave. If they were perfect all the time, you'd never question it. But because they give you both, the pain and the relief, you're stuck chasing the high, always holding on for the next good moment. And maybe you've noticed this in your own life. When you talk about the relationship, you spend most of your time explaining the good times, even if they were rare, while downplaying the bad. You hold on to the memories of when they were sweet, kind, and loving, because those are the moments that feel real to you. The painful parts get blurred out, justified, or excused, because admitting how bad it really is would shatter the illusion. That's how the cycle protects itself. It convinces you that the little glimpses of love are worth the suffering, when really, they're the bait keeping you hooked. What's even scarier is that this cycle doesn't just damage your relationship, it reshapes your sense of self. You start questioning your worth, doubting your instincts, and living in a constant state of waiting. Waiting for them to text back, waiting for them to be in a good mood, waiting for things to feel like they did in the beginning. You stop living for yourself and start living for the cycle without even realizing it. One of the hardest things about trauma bonds is realizing why you stay. From the outside, it seems simple. People say things like, if it hurts you, just leave. But if you've ever been caught in one, you know it's not that easy. It doesn't feel like a simple choice. It feels like life or death, like walking away would mean losing a part of yourself. And that's because trauma bonds don't just live in your emotions, they live in your body and your brain. When you're in this kind of relationship, your brain is constantly being put through a roller coaster of stress and relief. When they ignore you, criticize you, or pull away, your stress hormones like cortisol shoot up. You feel anxious, restless, panicked. Then, when they finally come back around and show you affection, your brain releases dopamine, the feel good chemical, and oxytocin, the bonding hormone. The contrast between those two states, the suffering and the sudden relief, is what makes the bond so powerful. It's the exact same pattern that keeps gamblers glued to slot machines. You never know when the win is coming, so you keep playing even when you're losing more than you're winning. That's why people describe trauma bonds as addictive, because in a very real way, they are. Your brain starts to crave the relief so much that you tolerate endless pain just to feel that one moment of comfort again. And here's the trick: your brain doesn't actually remember the pain as strongly as it remembers the relief. That's why you can cry yourself to sleep one night, swearing you're done, and then the next morning feel pulled back in by just one sweet message. The memory of the pain fades fast, but the memory of the high stays sharp. Another reason people stay is because trauma bonds mess with your sense of identity. Over time, you start to believe that your worth is tied to keeping this person happy. You measure yourself by how much attention or affection they give you. If they're cold, you feel worthless. If they're kind, you feel valuable. It becomes a cycle where your entire self esteem hangs on their moods. And because of that, leaving doesn't feel like leaving a toxic person. It feels like erasing yourself. On top of that, many people in trauma bonds carry old wounds from their past, often from childhood. If you grew up in an environment where love was inconsistent, maybe a parent was loving one moment and distant the next, you learn to equate unpredictability with love. So when someone does the same thing in adulthood, it feels familiar. It feels like home, even if home was unstable or painful. And because your nervous system was trained to survive in that kind of environment, part of you unconsciously seeks it out again. It doesn't mean you're broken. It just means your brain is repeating an old pattern it hasn't learned to escape yet. Another layer is hope. Hope is one of the strongest glues in a trauma bond. You keep waiting for them to go back to who they were in the beginning, when they love bombed you and made you feel like the most special person alive. You hold on to the idea that if you just love them enough, support them enough, or change yourself enough, they'll transform back into that version. And every once in a while they do. They'll say something sweet, make a small effort, or remind you of that magical early stage, and suddenly all your hope floods back in. That hope becomes the chain that keeps you tied, because you're not just in love with who they are, you're in love with the potential of who they could be. And let's be real, society doesn't make it easier. There's this romanticized idea that love is supposed to be dramatic, messy, and all consuming. We're told stories about soulmates who fight passionately, break up, get back together, and can't live without each other. Movies, songs, even friends sometimes feed into the belief that true love is supposed to hurt a little. So when you're stuck in a trauma bond, you might tell yourself, this must be what real love feels like. But in reality, what you're feeling isn't love, it's survival mode disguised as passion. Here's another truth most people don't realize. Trauma bonds create chemical dependency. Just like someone addicted to a substance, you build tolerance. The scraps of affection that once felt huge now feel like barely enough, so you keep chasing more. You might find yourself doing things you never thought you would, begging, apologizing for things that weren't your fault, forgiving behavior you once swore you'd never tolerate. And the whole time you convince yourself it's worth it because the thought of losing them feels unbearable. And that brings us to fear, the other chain that holds trauma bonds in place. Fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear that no one else will ever love you the way they do, fear that maybe you don't deserve better. Trauma bonds feed on fear because the longer you stay, the smaller your world becomes. You stop seeing options outside of the relationship, and before you know it, the idea of walking away feels impossible, even when deep down you know you're not happy. If any of this sounds like you, it's not because you're weak or foolish. It's because trauma bonds are designed to trap you. They play on your biology, your psychology, and your history, creating a prison that feels like home. And the most dangerous part is that you don't even realize how trapped you are until you start looking at it from the outside. But the good news is, once you start to see the pattern, you begin to take your power back. Because recognizing that what you're in isn't love, it's a cycle, changes everything. You stop asking yourself, why am I not enough? And you start asking, why am I giving so much of myself to someone who takes more than they give? That shift is the beginning of freedom. One of the questions that eats at people the most in a trauma bond is this: do they even realize what they're doing to me? Do they know how much harm they're causing, or are they just blind to it? The truth is, it depends. Some people are deeply manipulative and fully aware of the power they hold over you. They know that if they pull away, you'll chase. They know that if they hurt you and then comfort you, you'll bond to them even tighter. They play the game on purpose because control feeds their ego. These are the people who might mock you for being too sensitive or turn the blame back on you, knowing it will make you question yourself. With them, the harm isn't an accident, it's a strategy. But not everyone is calculating. Some people repeat this pattern without even realizing it because it's the only way they know how to connect. Maybe they grew up in chaos themselves. Maybe love was inconsistent in their own lives, so they unconsciously recreate the same instability with you. They might not see the damage they're doing because to them it feels normal. That doesn't make it okay, and it doesn't erase the harm. But it does explain why not every trauma bond comes from a deliberately cruel person. Sometimes it's the blind leading the blind, both people stuck in cycles they never learned to break. So why do they do it? Control, fear, comfort. For some, it's about power. They want to know they can pull your strings. For others, it's about survival. They don't know how to handle intimacy without pushing and pulling. And for some, it's simply selfishness. They enjoy the benefits of your devotion without taking responsibility for your pain. Whatever the reason, the result is the same. You end up trapped in a relationship that feeds on your energy while draining your spirit. And that brings us to the most important part. How do you end the cycle? Because understanding a trauma bond is only half the battle. Breaking free is where the real healing begins. The first step is awareness. You have to name it for what it is. Once you call it a trauma bond, it stops being this confusing, romantic, maybe we're just passionate story and starts being what it truly is, a cycle designed to keep you stuck. That shift in perspective cracks the door open. The second step is distance. This is the hardest part because your body and brain will scream at you to go back. You'll feel the withdrawal, the cravings, the emptiness, and you'll convince yourself that reaching out to them will fix it. But this is where you remind yourself the pain isn't because you're losing love, it's because you're breaking an addiction. Just like quitting a drug, the withdrawal hurts, but it's temporary. Every day you stay away, the bond weakens, little by little. The third step is rebuilding your identity. Trauma bonds chip away at your sense of self. So part of healing is remembering who you are outside of that relationship. Start small. Do things you enjoy. Spend time with people who remind you of your worth. Write down the things you had to silence or sacrifice while you were with them. Reclaim those pieces. Because the stronger your sense of self becomes, the harder it is for someone else to control you. The fourth step is support. No one breaks a trauma bond alone. Whether it's therapy, close friends, support groups, or even resources online, you need voices outside of the cycle to remind you of reality when you're tempted to slip back in, because the cycle will call you back. It always does. But having people who can anchor you, who can say, remember why you left, makes all the difference. And finally, forgiveness. Not for them, but for yourself. You might feel angry that you stayed so long, or ashamed that you let yourself be treated this way. But the truth is, you stayed because you were human. You were wired for connection, and they exploited that wiring. That's not weakness. That's proof of how deeply you're capable of loving, and that love isn't wasted. It just needs to be redirected first toward yourself. So, are they aware of the harm they cause? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But here's the thing, you don't need to figure that out in order to heal. Their awareness doesn't change your pain, and it doesn't change your worth. What matters is your awareness. The moment you start seeing the cycle for what it is, you begin to loosen its grip. And the more you choose yourself over the bond, the more freedom you gain. In the end, a trauma bond isn't love, it's a cage. And the key has always been in your hands. Walking away might feel like the hardest thing you'll ever do, but it's also the bravest. Because love shouldn't feel like begging, it shouldn't feel like withdrawal, and it shouldn't feel like pain disguised as passion. Real love is steady, safe, and freeing, and you deserve nothing less.